Welcome, sports fans, to GenX Classic Sports, where we bring the nostalgia of our sports-filled youth into the present day. Grab your favorite retro jersey, crack open a cold one, and let's stroll down memory lane together. We're here to discuss iconic sports moments, teams, and athletes from our generation. This is GenX Classic Sports, sports talk for Gen Xers by Gen Xers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the GenX Classic Sports podcast. I can't tell you enough how much we appreciate you listening and your support. We're doing something special every few months, and that's discussing a GenX Classic Sports movie. Our very first one is in honor of high school football, which we're in the middle of right now here in the state of Arkansas. Founding fathers David and Mark and I are going to talk about Friday Night Lights. Yes, that Friday Night Lights. We hope you enjoy this nostalgic trip back to high school football in the state of Texas in 1988. Thank you for joining us. This will actually be episode 12. I know what number I'm doing for once because I never know the number. This is episode 12, and this is kind of a special I dreamed up to do where we're going to talk about a movie, and then we'll talk about what's behind the movie and some things like that too with it. But I took a executive decision, and I picked Friday Night Lights to be our first one in honor of the fact that we're in the middle of the state championships for high school football in Arkansas. That's why I picked that. And so Friday Night Lights, guys, it's on Netflix right now. I told y'all that we could do a little research by watching it on Netflix. We've all seen the movie. I will definitely talk movie. Let's talk movie first, and then we'll go back and we'll fill in things that are interesting about where the book and the movie maybe differ. Is that cool? Does that makes sense? All right, let me set it up real quickly in case y'all don't remember, and the people listening don't remember, the three people listening that
up to 3 now.
The season in question. Yeah, we're up to 3. We got 3 listeners. The season that was the book was written in 1988. It follows the Odessa Permian Panthers from 1988. The book actually came out in 1990. So the movie, which we're going to spend most of our time on, wasn't made until 2004. And so just by way of introducing it, the movie was based on the book. There were 2 screenwriters who wrote the script beyond the book. The director is a dude named Peter Berg, and y'all seen him in a ton of movies. He's a character actor. He's usually a guy in the background as a cop or a bad guy. You never know which, but he became a director, and he and Marky Mark worked together a lot. Peter Berg directed Lone Survivor, the Marcus Luttrell story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He directed Patriots Day, about the bombing in Boston during the marathon and the manhunt. And he directed Deepwater Horizon, which was yet another Mark Wahlberg movie about the explosion on the oil derrick out in the Gulf of Mexico. So I think it was in Gulf of Mexico. Anyway, so he specializes in action movies is what I would basically say. So he's a good director. And then the cast, just for the people who don't know, Billy Bob Thornton plays the head coach. And the first thing I thought of when this movie came out back in 2004 was, awesome, Billy Bob Thornton and the kid from Sling Blade are going to be in it together. And the quarterback, his name is Mike Winchell, is played by Lucas Black, who's the kid from Sling Blade. So he and Billy Bob got back together for this movie, which I always thought was awesome. And then there's a long list of other people. The biggest name on the list right now would be Tim McGraw, who plays one of the characters' fathers, and we'll talk about that. So there's a lot of familiar names on the cast list because it was young people, and now there are people in their 30s and 40s doing stuff around Hollywood. We'll talk about some of them later, but that's the backdrop. Odessa, Texas, 1988. And another reason I connect with this is because that was my senior year of playing high school football as well. So when this book came out in 1990, it looks, by the way, still have it. Still have the hardcover book.
Yep, I have it somewhere.
I bought it in 91 in college. So anyway, I was very much into this. I think Sports Illustrated did a thing on it. So 1988, Odessa Permian. All right, so that's the setting. So what do you guys, whenever you first remember kind of hearing about it, Did you have any thoughts initially about anything about the movie? Oh, just another football movie or what?
Just another football movie to me.
I liked it because Billy Bob was in it. That was one of my things that kind of
And it
I
is
was
a
glad
little
he was cast
historical,
in
I
it.
guess, as far as Texas
Yeah,
football, you hear about them, and that give you a little insight of, how religious it is out there, and especially in West Texas.
right, right. That and to me, David, that was it too. I mean, we were out of high
Right.
school a few years, a couple of years,
We
three. I'm
can.
not
Go
going to
ahead.
age ourselves here.
Too late.
Um,
Too late.
Too late. But anyway, it was a big thing, and with the West Texas high school, it being like you said, almost a religion, we didn't really see that here as much in our area, but it was still, just really interesting to never seen a movie on high school football. So it was well anticipated.
So does that mean both of y'all had
No,
read the book when
no.
the movie
It was,
came out or
well,
not?
probably 20 years later, I read the book.
Uh, yeah,
Okay, so we've
Yes,
all read the
I
book.
think.
All right.
hmm
That was my point. Is so David hadn't read the book yet, but he thought it's another football movie. I had read the book and was anticipating the movie just because I wanted to see how well they did it. And I guess Mark, you had read it before then.
yeah, yeah. I read it before the movie came out.
Yeah, I mean, I was totally excited that Billy Bob was going to play the coach because he kind of looks like him, and I just know that Billy Bob's such a great actor, and he kind of has that Southern thing that translates to Texas, that twang so well when he needs it, and so yeah, I was excited. Let's talk about how big football is in Texas. Then I will jump out of the movie quickly and remind y'all that the writer picked this part of the country for a reason. He lived in Philadelphia and he asked around where's football really important, what part of the country, and he found out it probably didn't get any bigger than Texas. And so then he got to looking at who had the best programs and who might have a successful season coming up, and all roads led to Odessa, is what he said.
Hmm.
So I just reread the book and finished it today. So he picked Odessa because of tradition, is what I'm trying to say, and I guess achievement, and then the forecast that they might be
Let me
really good that
interrupt.
season.
There's a lot of tradition in a lot of Texas.
No, I'm through.
Why was Odessa so special? Because you look at this, like in the movies, they won state, what, three times before the movie came out, I think, or before the year of the movie.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it
yeah.
looks like there would be more schools out there.
Well, there was another facet to it. Yeah, he didn't want just a successful football team. He wanted a team that was in that position for sure, that had tradition and all. But he also was interested in the
Oh,
town, what was going
okay.
on in the
Yeah.
town at the same time. So
hmm
and he anticipated a lot of it, and then a lot of it surprised him. But the way that Texas and oil money went up and down over the decades, and Odessa was one of those towns that would be booming one minute and busting the next. And
hmm
so he wanted to capture that ebb and flow of how the community's prosperous and then it's not so much and prosperous, and just sort of how, because of that, how the football team becomes so important to people.
Right. How it becomes actually more important than anything else in that community at that time.
Yeah. So David, it was twofold. It wasn't just football. It was also about having a setting for that would be interesting as well. I think.
And that is an interesting backstory in that movie, the town.
Yeah. Yeah, the book goes into that for a lot of pages, and of course, and so back to the movie. You don't get it to hear a ton about that, which is unfortunate. But if I could describe the movie, I would say it's just a very tight window about their season, and then they squeezed in what they could, about everything else. It was a pretty good sense of the characters, but I didn't get all that history about Odessa as much out of it, out of the movie. I mean, it was a rough looking place, kind of, you know.
Yeah, and you could tell just, I don't know, where they hung out. They did the corn, not to ruin the movie. They met at the end in that truck stop.
Right.
So an important corn flip is in the truck stop. It's just, you can tell it's just a little Yeah,
Well,
rougher, rough
there's not a
place.
tree
Could
in the
be.
movie.
Nope. You can't get any closer to BFE than Odessa, Texas.
Yeah,
I think you take a left there and that takes you to BFE. But anyway,
yeah, and I'll give a little more history later when we talk about things that are different about the book and stuff. But that's the background for people who, it's like the actors say when they're doing interviews 25 years later. Hey, if you haven't seen it by now, I'm spoiling it for you. I'm sorry. So for those who haven't seen it, it's Odessa, Texas. Okay, that's what it is. Mark, do you have?
What's the saying about Odessa and Midland? I think if you want to go raise hell, go to Odessa. If you want to raise a
I
family, go to
believe that's
Midland.
right.
correct.
I think I've heard
I
that.
think that was something like I read that
Yeah.
something like that.
Okay, so having said all that, the movie basically covers this team's 1988 season, and it starts. The movie starts out with basically their star running back, Booby Miles, and Booby's literally jogging to practice. I don't know if y'all remember that, but it looks hot as hell, and he's out there jogging to the school.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, a little something else about background that just so people understand the movie itself. The movie is shot at the actual stadium where they play in Odessa. Okay. And that stadium holds 19,000 people.
Didn't it cost like $6 million to build? Almost $6 million in
Yes. That's
1980
the one that
money.
one of the ones Ross Perot got fired up about in Texas about they're building stadiums and not libraries and laboratories and stuff at these schools. And actually Odessa shared that Permian shared that stadium with Odessa High School because they had a sister school in the city. And so Odessa Permian and Odessa High School shared it's called Ratliff Stadium. It holds 19,000 people. And in the movie, it starts out with Booby jogging to the stadium. So for practice in the summer. And the date they show when it starts is August 6th, 1988. And I would almost bet that was the first Monday that they were allowed to practice, right? They do show a scene quickly.
Did they have restrictions back then?
About what?
Oh
Restrictions.
no, practice dates.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I know Texas had
Like,
spring football way before
yeah,
Arkansas did.
restrictions. Oh, that's the first day they were allowed to practice. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Go ahead.
I bet it was the first. I bet it was the first day of allowed 2-a-days and contact or whatever y'all remember. You can work out all summer if you want, but coaches being there and pads and all that is a certain date. So
Right.
they show a sign with their state titles on it early in the movie, and it says 1984 was their last state title. So this is 4 years later. So apparently, for Permian people, that was a drought they weren't willing to suffer through much longer, right?
Right.
Yes.
Y'all remember what happens when they have the very first at the beginning of the movie? They have some scenes at practice. Y'all remember anything about those that was interesting where they're showing them down on the field practicing in August, or maybe what was happening?
Yeah, the dad come down
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Tim McGraw's
yeah.
character. No way. I wouldn't think a coach would allow that.
Well, and the real coach said he wouldn't have. I mean, that was strictly for the movie. That never happened in real life. But Tim McGraw's character is named, I believe, Charlie Billingsley. And he comes down out of the stands at practice and pushes his son down and yells at him for fumbling a ball in practice while the head coach just watches. The head coach said
Yeah.
he'd never let that happen for real, so that was for Hollywood.
Yeah. And they obviously had cameras at the stadium uh, in the movie. I'm not sure if that was true. And didn't the quarterback, uh, Winchell, wasn't he like signing autographs at one time in the movie?
Uh, the way it starts is they're having their first practice, and they intercut the practices with like a montage of all the different players that were talking to the media after practice. So it's practice
Okay.
running a drill, and then the quarterback's talking to the media, running a drill, the running backs. And so it was actually more of what was going on with them answering questions with the media. But Winchell, it was
Okay.
Winchell and several of the stars that they focus on in the. There's like 5 players they really focus on in the movie. But I know you've seen it. You saw it longer ago than David and I did. We've just seen the movie lately, so but you're right. They imply through that practice with the media stuff that these guys are superstars. If that's
Right.
what you were driving at, you're correct.
That's exactly, yeah, what I'm talking about is
Yeah,
that they were basically superstars in the town itself and in the
right. I
area.
mean, they're shown giving press
And
conferences to like 10 or 12 reporters standing around. I mean, that's not normal.
right. No,
So
not for a high
no,
school.
and so they also show what I was trying to get at with David, and he got he jumped over to the Tim McGraw character. There was another character that was Booby's uncle that was sitting in the stands, and the point was you could see a lot of people in the bleachers watching practice. I mean, a lot,
Hmm.
and so a
Right.
lot of parents were there watching, and Booby's uncle that he lived with definitely had reasons to be there because he was trying to get him into college. The Tim McGraw's character's name is Charlie Billingsley, and he goes down and chews out his son, whose name is Don Billingsley. He's a running back and he fumbles. They're implying in the movie over the course of 2 hours that Tim McGraw his character must have been a really good player at Permian also.
Hmm.
Because he's wearing a state champ ring. He flashes it several times to his son and tells him kind of, I'm just basically saying you'll never have one of these if you don't quit fumbling, that kind of crap.
Right.
So he's abusive in that way, and he's drunk most of the time in the movie. And his character's Charlie Billingsley, who played at Permian before, and now he had a son, Don, playing on the team. So yeah, that's the guy that comes out of the bleachers and gets on to his son and pushes him down, and you pretty much get the idea that he was drunk when he did that. I mean, it made Tim McGraw's character was not a nice guy. I mean, he's bad to his son 99% of the movie, honestly. So,
Right.
but yeah, he pushes him down. No coach would ever allow that. But anyway, so speaking of his son, they then jump to some scenes where they imply that his son, the kid named Don Billingsley, is quite the partier. They cut to some scenes of parties. He's just getting trashed at a party. So they show him acting like dad, basically.
It was a pretty big party they were at too.
Oh yeah, yeah. They were having an end of the summer, beginning of the school year party. It looked like. I don't know if you remember this, Mark. David does. There's a scene where they're at like almost like a Sonic drive-in, except it's a local mom and pop place after practice one night.
Right. Right.
Do y'all remember what happens there?
Yeah.
Yeah, what happens there?
Uh, that's where family hands him their baby and he takes a picture
The
with them.
quarterback. Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, the quarterback takes a picture with the baby.
yeah.
I think maybe that's where I was
It
thinking
is.
he was out signing
I kind of thought
autographs.
that's where you were
Okay.
going, but yeah. So, I mean, you're 10 minutes into the movie, and it's implied very heavily that these guys are heroes because they can't get through their meal without somebody handing them a baby on a Friday night. And if you'll remember, which you may not, but the guy that hands him the baby, he's got a state champ ring on, and
Right.
flat. By the way, he's got his trucker hat on backwards, with his young wife and his baby, and he flashes that ring and tells them, "This is what you're after, boys," kind of thing.
Right.
So
Lots of pressure on these young guys from generations before them that were successful to keep the program going.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, and it's not said in the movie, I don't think, but what I know now is that they started winning state titles in the '60s, and so they were
right.
active in every decade winning state titles, and I'll talk about
Hmm.
that later. So there was a lot of pressure on these kids, a lot.
I think the sign outside their stadium in the movie said they won state in 65, 72, and 84, I believe.
Uh,
I might have
You
missed
missed
a
one
year.
year. 65, 72, 1980, and 1984. They'd already won states. They'd won in every
84. Okay.
decade. What's crazy, if you're into Buffalo Bills type trivia, is that they were runners up in 68, 70, 75, 85 up until that point.
Right.
So they had been in 8 state title games in 20 years. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That is pretty good.
So
Especially in Texas.
yeah, yeah, especially in Texas. So what? Okay, so I'm curious. I'm gonna draw a line in my notes, and I'm gonna stop right there. So what we know about the kids so far is that Billingsley is portrayed as a partier. His dad is an abusive alcoholic. Uh, somewhere in there, there's a little bit about. So Winchell is the superstar quarterback because he's taking pictures with the kid. Uh, what was y'all's first impression of Booby in the movie, or from what you remember? What about Booby?
Arrogant. Very arrogant.
Yeah, Booby was kind of a loudmouth character, right?
Yes. It seemed like he was all about him. And maybe he was that good. Maybe he knew that, the road to state title ran through him or he was going to lead them to it. I don't know.
Mark, do you remember the running back Booby Miles?
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
lived with his uncle LV or LC, I can't remember.
Yeah. My impression of him is just like David. He was arrogant, but I mean, there was a lot of pressure on him too. He had the talent, and he had been told that, from what I can tell from the movie, that he would lead them to the state championship. So, and he was being highly recruited, as far as I remember, and probably had a lot of offers too at that point. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a scene in the movie where it shows him just opening up letters after letters after letters.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a real subtle thing that happens in that scene, and I didn't notice it till I rewatched the movie. He's going through a bunch of letters in the weight room, and there's two subtle things that happen. Number one is he's not lifting weights.
Yeah,
He
Winchell
was called out. Winchell called him out
Winchell
on that.
called him out because
yeah, I forgot that.
he
Yeah,
goes through his letters and then he leaves, and Winchell says, "Hey, Booby, you didn't work out." He said, "I don't have to. It's God given, man." Number
Yeah.
two, that was very subtle, but he can't pronounce some of the words on his offer letters from some of the colleges, and so he has to ask a
Right.
teammate how to pronounce. I think it was distinguished or something like that.
uh,
Distinguished.
And
Yes.
so,
Distinguished.
this is what you have to do in movie writing. You don't have a chapter to go into Booby's academic career. You have to say it in a line or two or show it visually. What's going on with Booby behind the scenes, and that tells you what you need to know. He can't read his offer letter, or pronounce all or understand all the words in his offer letter. So there's an implication there that he's not the best student, which sets up the drama behind his story. By the way, so yeah, Booby, okay, so he's a loudmouth. He doesn't work out, and the kid in the movie is actually 30 years old that plays Booby. He doesn't look like it. By the way, that's a big thing of mine with movies. Cast teenagers as teenagers and don't put 40-year-olds. I hate that. This is one of the few movies where the characters look like they were age appropriate. I thought all these guys look
hmm
like teenagers to me. Even the running back.
yeah,
except for at the end, the
Yeah, well,
team they played.
yeah, that's a
I'm
whole
jumping
other
ahead.
topic, and we'll get to that. No,
All
you're
right, go
right.
ahead.
Booby's played by a 30-year-old, and from what I've seen of Booby on film on YouTube, Booby was bigger and more muscular and certainly fast. And so y'all were talking about him being arrogant and everything. That's because the year before, as a junior, and this is not in the movie, the expectations are in the movie, but Booby had 1,300 yards rushing the year before and had
hmm
come out of nowhere to lead them. And he was about 200 plus pounds and was the fastest thing on the field, apparently. So that's a good combination. And I always say this: all roads lead through Arkansas. Guess who was recruiting Booby as active as anybody else? Was the University of Arkansas. He
right.
he had kind of narrowed his choices down to Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, and Nebraska, from what the book says. Just
That's funny because the movie always talked about USC and UCLA. That's what he mostly
right,
talked about on his
right,
recruiting letters.
right. So
Um, let me interrupt here real
I
quick.
no,
So he, from what I know, I mean, he had 1,300 yards. He was not the only back in the backfield either. This was not a spread offense that these guys ran.
nope.
So, so in fact, I think I read where he was a fullback actually
You're correct.
in the formation.
Whatever the heck offense they ran, it always had two backs on the field, and they called their main rusher the fullback normally. So he was listed as
Yeah,
fullback, and I don't know what the heck they were running, but it was some, it was a quarterback under center, and it was always a fullback and a tailback together on the field, is what it appeared to be. So,
right.
which is totally indicative of the 80s. So, you're right, Mark. He was their fullback technically. And so, by the way, so we're in the point of the movie where we've established who these people are. We know the dad's a drunk. We know his son's is on that road. We know Booby is kind of a show off who's trying to get into college. Do you remember the scene where all the kids are partying? There's a scene where the coach and his wife are dressed up and they go have a dinner party. And what happens at the dinner party? This is all to establish the background of the story. What's happening at that dinner party?
The coach is being told how to coach, basically, on giving, we'll say suggestions on what kind of defenses and stuff. Well, not defense. The defense thing
Yeah.
came in later, but he was giving suggestions on how to coach his team at that dinner party by not just by couples, not just the man. The wife was doing. They were chiming in with their opinions too, which was kind of I don't know, kind of odd, I guess, kind
That's
of
what made it hilarious. Yeah, that's
different.
what made it hilarious. They're obviously in the home of a well-to-do booster, and there's about 5 couples sitting around the table, and the wives are telling Coach Gaines what kind of defense to run. It's hysterical, man. Yeah,
It kind of reminds you of Hoosiers.
yeah, it does.
The scene in Hoosiers where
Yeah,
what kind of defense
At
are
the
you
at
going to run
at the
this year,
at the
coach?
barber shop.
Yeah.
By the way, spoiler alert. That's going to be our basketball movie that we talk about this winter. So good job, Mark. Okay, so we know that the coach is getting input from the community. We know pretty much who these players are. And there's a scene where the DJs from the local radio station, this is just a throw in thing, that they're talking about how much the stadium cost. And somebody calls in and suggests that money could have gone to some other things, and it was not well received. I mean, that money should have been spent on football the way 99% of the people in that town believe. Okay, so David alluded to this real quick. They're getting close to playing their first practice or their first game of the season, and the coach actually gets a room full of boosters telling him specifically what kind of offense or what kind of defense to run, and specifically which players need to play where.
they came to his office on that scene
Yes, at the stadium.
and was that main booster character came in there with several others and yes, telling them what defenses to run.
Yeah, and they're totally specific about it. They're like, you need to put Ivory Christian at middle linebacker, and you need to put this guy at defensive. I mean, it's and Billy Bob Thornton's character's just sitting
Yeah,
there going, okay, okay, yeah. That was pretty funny to me because that's twice in the first 10 minutes of the movie we've seen the fans telling the coach what to do.
I would have loved to actually heard the real conversations on that and what the coach had said and actually said and what have you.
The thing is, we know even from where we grew up that happens. Of course, it does.
Oh yeah, 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 and like what Mark talked about earlier, we're not used to football being a religion around here, but it was important to our small town. We just didn't. We thought it was really important, but compared to the way it is in Texas, it's no, it's not. It's not that important here.
Yeah, I would.
Or people don't take it that
I
serious, I
think
guess.
when Mark was talking about that, I think the difference is that we focused on the entire sports program overall, like just all of it, how important it was, and then these
Right.
things we're talking about were specific sports and specific towns. But athletics as a unifying thing is a huge deal in any small town. Of course, it is. and
Oh
maybe
yeah,
no less
absolutely. Yeah.
important, but we can't just say, well, it was our basketball team or it was our football. It was all of it, really. And they just had they didn't give a hoot about any other sports. We're talking football. So okay, so in the movie, what happens in the first game of the season with Booby?
Booby hurts his knee because backup running back couldn't find his helmet. Like it was a blowout, right?
He couldn't find it because Booby hid it from him, so he
Oh,
couldn't go
did he?
and
I
get
missed
it.
that part.
Yeah,
Yeah, I wondered about that.
he put it on the bench.
Yep. I wondered about that too because yeah, the kid's name we're talking about was Chris Comer. He was Booby's backup. And they're blowing out the first opponent like 42-7, and Comer is supposed to go in and he suddenly can't find his helmet and Booby is laughing about it. And then Booby gets up and runs to Gaines and says, I'll go in, or Gaines says, Booby, you're gonna have to go back in or whatever. And Mark, I wondered if Booby hit his helmet. I wondered the same
I
thing.
think he did. It seemed like I remember that, but it may not. I may be confusing that, but for some reason, I've had that picture of him
It
in the movie hiding
could
it,
be.
so he can't go in.
Yeah, and so because of that, Booby goes in, and in the very first play, he goes in, he plants his leg, and as he plants it, he gets plowed from the side, and they show him land in a heap with a bad knee. They win the game, but on the way home, the fans are just ripping Coach Gaines for playing Booby in a blowout. And of course, that's one of those things where we as fans understand what we see and hear, but we don't know the whole story. So nobody knew that Comer was supposed to be in there and just couldn't find his, he Thurman Thomased his helmet right before he was supposed to go in. Okay, so Booby gets hurt. At some point in there is when they play their second game and they blow out that opponent without Booby. Oh no, I'm sorry. They got blown out. My mistake. The second game in the movie,
Yeah.
they play Abilene, and Abilene beat them 42-6 because they didn't have Booby. My mistake. They are 1-1 after 2 games, non-conference.
And the fans on the call-in shows are ripping the coach for being so one-dimensional in his offense, for relying on one player to run the offense. And of course, yeah, they ripped it pretty hard. Well, according to the movie.
Yeah, and in the midst of all that, there's a little bit of stuff going on about Winchell, the quarterback. Winchell apparently had played the year before and had a lot of interceptions. And, this is the 80s, and I got to looking into what I could in his numbers. And to be balanced back then meant you got over 1,000 yards passing. That was balance. And so Winchell the year before, I think he was around 1,000 yards passing or something. So he was the clear cut quarterback. But you notice in the movie, Gaines sure does talk to him a lot and checks on him a lot mentally, right? Winchell, because what's going on?
Right,
Yeah.
And y'all
right.
remember what's going on at home with Winchell?
His mom's sick. I don't really know what the deal was, but she was. Well, that girl at the party asked him if his mom was crazy, so maybe his mom has some mental issues or something. Because yeah, she was sick, and that's weighing heavily on his mind. And you learn in the movie when he makes a phone call a little bit later on, he has a sibling, and he's wanting them to come home to sit with be with their mom because she says she's your mom too. I don't know who the sibling. I don't know if it's a brother or sister or what the story is there. That may have been in the book, but yeah, his mom's pretty bad off apparently. But in the opening scene, she's going over the plays with
Right,
him,
at the
so
breakfast table.
she had her moments.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
reason I bring that up is because I think it's a planted kind of thought that game number 2, when they get blown out without Booby, the implication is that Winchell, they didn't have faith enough in Winchell to throw the ball and kind of throw their way out of their injured running back situation. That was what I took out of it, with all the fans ripping them
Right,
for being one dimensional and
right.
stuff.
I I think that's right.
And I kind of got it out of the movie too that Winchell, he had a little confidence problem
He did,
himself.
yeah.
You know, he wasn't the biggest guy.
Nope,
He wasn't the most
nope.
athletic guy. Um, so he had a lot. He had the town riding on his shoulders. He had he basically was the man of the house at home.
A lot of pressure.
Uh, Lots of
Right.
pressure for
Yep.
probably a 16, 17, 18-year-old guy.
And 5 times a week he plays in front of 19,000 people, and probably the other 5 it's 7
Yeah.
to 10,000 at least.
Yeah. I mean, that's the size of some college stadiums. I don't know what like UCA would hold, but
It's that's what I
it,
thought.
it's every bit of that.
I thought other than ASU and Fayetteville, that their high school stadium's probably bigger than anyone in Arkansas. Okay, and Abilene in the movie, when they get blown out by Abilene with no booby, that's where they're driving home, and some of the players are in cars with people, and Billingsley is in there with Tim McGraw, his dad, and what happens then?
That's where his dad just loses it. Doesn't he kick the window out of the back and uh,
Kicked both
Kick
of
2
them
of them
out.
out.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Uh,
One on each side. Yeah.
the son is driving the car, right?
Yes.
That's what I remember. And he's laying in the back seat drunk.
Yeah, because the dad's drunk.
Yeah, and he throws his ring out.
What's interesting about that is how many kids. I don't know how far Abilene is, but they make it clear in the book, at least, that a lot of these road trips are 3+ hours. What
Well, it has to
what
be.
kid
You're in the middle of
Right.
nowhere.
What kid wants to then drive his drunk dad home after the game? I'm sure he'd much rather be passed out on the bus sleeping, but he's got to drive his drunk dad home. That was never mentioned. To me, that was a big implication of the responsibility that this kid kind of
Ah,
has.
yeah. I didn't pick up
Right.
on that. In fact, he wasn't on the bus with the kids, other kids. He was driving his dad back
And
home.
his
Yeah.
and his drunk dad throws his own state champ ring out the window to going down the highway. And so they have this.
Yeah. This is after berating his kid on telling him, you I'm supposed to raise a man and I didn't, and all this, and like he's giving his kid a hard time
Yeah, I mean,
over a.
kudos to Tim McGraw for being great at being a mean drunk, because he was just so cruel to the kid after he'd fumble or they'd lose. He was just so cruel to him, man. I mean, it was awful. So I don't know. I'm just kind of picking through the plot here because I don't know any other way to talk about it. So what happens with Booby's injury basically in the movie? Y'all want to talk about that for a minute, or how did that kind of proceed with the knee?
Well,
Well, he hit it from the coach. He didn't actually. Yeah.
Yeah, y'all are right. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
he claimed after 2 or 3 weeks that he's fine, or after a couple weeks that it's fine. He's fine, and he's going to his personal doctor, who is not a specialist apparently, and I can just only picture the personal doctor we grew up with, down in Bernice, I mean, just a little at a clinic's what I'm guessing. I don't know really. But personal doctor says his knee's fine. And I think doesn't Coach Gaines want him to go get it scoped, or not scoped, but MRI on it, and he doesn't want to do it, and his uncle's all for not doing it too.
Right.
And then it gets re-injured. Almost the first play he played, wasn't it? After sitting out, they lost 2 weeks in a row, didn't they?
Yeah, jumping forward. Yeah,
Without Booby.
no, let's jump forward a little bit in the plot. So, or catch up on the plot. So the next game, Chris Comer finally figures out how to play football. He scores an 85-yard touchdown in that game, and they roll. They roll and they get on a run. So then there's a montage of Comer going crazy against people. Of course, the entire time Booby's hurt. And so when the montage ends, it says they're 5-1 for the season.
Okay.
So then Booby goes to the specialist in Midland. And then what, y'all take it from there. What happens when he finally goes to an actual bone specialist?
Mark, I'll let you do it if you remember it.
From what I remember, I mean, he finds out that it is a complete tear at that point, and um, I assume surgery is needed. Now, this is the '80s, probably not easier surgery than it is
You should
today.
know.
But yeah, they I don't think they did it arthroscopically back then.
David, that's why I wanted Mark to talk about the ACL injury from 1988. If anybody knows about
Yeah,
knee injuries from the 80s, it would be Mark.
yeah, he
Mark would
would
know.
know.
Yeah, so it, you know, it, yeah, complete tear, but he wants to try anyway, because he knows he's not going to come back from that. Comer's out there taking his spotlight, so he's going to try again.
Booby feels it slipping away.
Right,
That's what's
Yeah.
exactly.
going on for sure. And then
In the movie, they show Booby going off on the doctors because the doctors at Midland. Midland Lee's a rival of Permian, and Booby, the
Oh,
character
yeah.
Booby's going off on the doctor saying, "You're from Midland, you just don't want me to
Ah,
play, and who's paying you?" And all that. He just goes
I for,
off and
that's
gets
correct.
mad,
I forgot that.
and
I forgot about that,
the
David. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't know that if I hadn't recently watched it, but
what I
yeah,
didn't mention, and it was kind of subtle, but the next opponent is Midland Lee. And so Booby is trying to get ready to play Midland Lee. He goes to a Midland specialist who tells him he can't play, and he goes off on him and says, "You just don't want me playing against Midland Lee this week."
Right.
So that and
Which is their huge rival.
yeah,
I
and
took it.
but keep in mind on the way to Midland Hospital, Booby's uncle's telling him that this hospital is the best hospital in Texas.
yes, but that's not what Booby
And so
focuses on. That's
that's
not
what.
what he.
No, Booby does not focus, and his uncle changes his tune too. He goes along with Booby during the argument. Really, he didn't really say. I would think the uncle would say, "No, Booby, this doctor's looking out for you," stuff like that. But in the movie, he didn't. I don't know what happened in real life.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about some of that. It's basically the same. So in the movie, they need to beat Midland Lee to make the playoffs. That I don't know if that scrolls by on the screen or if that's a piece of dialogue, but basically, Permian needs to beat Midland Lee to be guaranteed a playoff spot. And they somehow in all of that, you hear that if they don't, it'll come down to possibly a coin toss, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Right.
So Booby and his uncle leave Midland. They go back to Gaines, and they tell Coach Gaines that Booby's ready to suit up. Nothing's been done to his knee whatsoever. Nothing.
Mm-mm.
He's been told he needs surgery. He went crazy. So he suits up with a brace on. His uncle agrees to let that happen. Gaines, you can tell by looking at Billy Bob Thornton, Gaines doesn't believe a word of it. And
No, you're right. In the conversation with him, you can tell
he
he doesn't
doesn't
believe him.
start him, and I think that he knows he's fine with Comer regardless, and Booby at worst is a decent insurance policy, but even if he never plays again, they've got who they need, and I think some part of Billy Bob's character is like not wanting to put him out there basically for his own sake. So they're playing Midland Lee, who's a great opponent, and they get behind at the half, and when they come back out, what happens with Comer and Booby? Y'all remember? By the way, he's been on the bench yelling he needs to play this entire time. He's wanting in there. He's bugging everybody about.
Yeah, that that's right.
Oh yeah, he's making it rhyme. If you want to win, put Booby in and stuff
So
like that.
so
Yeah,
Comer is not getting it done. The team's not getting it done. So after the half, when they're behind, they come back out and what do?
They
they
put
put
him
First
in.
Booby
play,
in.
he crumples. They put him first
Yep.
play, he goes down. Um, he gets up. He runs the ball one more time and he's done for good. He crumples, he gets up, tries it again, and he's down and he's out after that.
Right. He can't cut on that knee.
He can't cut at all. He can't
And
cut
I
at all on that leg. Right.
no. And yeah, I know how that feels.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to kill the recording right about here. Okay, folks, we're going to stop right there for this first episode of Friday Night Lights, and we'll pick back up in a couple of weeks with the conclusion to our Friday Night Lights GenX Classic Sports movie. Thank you for joining us on GenX Classic Sports, where nostalgia meets the thrill of the game. Tune in next time for more insightful discussions and memorable moments, brought to you by Pine Street Productions. Until then, stay passionate about sports and keep the memories alive.